And we are live streaming here on the Real Kyper at Noon Show. Was that a countdown that I saw? That was really cool. Man, are we advancing this show? Felt like it was a late night with David Letterman. Maybe a top 10 list. Can't be that far off. Welcome, everybody. I'm Nick Kypreos. What we hope to do in the next little while is catch up on a lot of those storylines last night. The biggest one of all, the Steven Stamkos return. And yes, I got a little bit of a golf attire on. Perhaps we might be looking at a little bit of an abbreviated show today. I will be in a charity event later on this afternoon. I will be social distancing a golf game in the efforts of helping out the Toronto General Hospital, also Western Hospital. Of course, those frontline workers have been incredible the last 4 months. So I'm going to try to do my part this afternoon. So we got Doug McLean on assignment. I can tell you that Alan May is doing well. I can report that after Tuesday, we had a terrific, 45, 50 minutes with Alan May, and then poof, disappeared. Like it was like witchcraft. He just disappeared in thin air. But I can tell you that there was a power failure involved at his location in Georgetown. So he's doing well. So what we're going to do today is certainly hit all the major storylines, and there are a lot, especially last night, which is now deemed maybe the best 2 minutes and 47 seconds in Stanley Cup final history out of Steven Stamkos. We've got Jordan and Joe on the sidelines. They're going to be involved as well on the show, and maybe we can get Jordan to even get a couple of more of your comments through on the show as well. So they're standing by. They're going to be ready, and let's certainly dive into Steven Stamkos and what we were able to see last night. Now, with someone who's been involved in mainstream media the last 20 years and the last 5 with Hockey Night in Canada, I can tell you that usually when you prep for a show, you have all these different angles that you want. And that includes, I want to talk about Hedman. I want to talk about Point. I want to talk about Dallas's defense. And the issue is when you're in the Stanley Cup final, there's only so many of those storylines that you can do and then rinse and repeat. So what was interesting last night watching Hockey Night in Canada, a show that I was with for 5 years, I knew exactly what happened. You build this show and you start creating these storylines. And then once you find out Steven Stamkos is in, you chuck it all out the window. It's gone. Nope. We are just going to stick with one story and one main story. And it was it, folks. And that's the beauty of television. That's the beauty of getting those human interest stories out there. And is there and was there a better human interest story than Steven Stamkos coming back and playing after almost 7 months off? I believe he had surgery on his core muscles at the beginning of March, and not to be in a position to play one game until Game 3 of the Stanley Cup final was pretty incredible to watch. And the buildup that the television stations, and I'm sure NBC, I did not watch the NBC feed, but I'm sure they were on top of it as well. It was all about Steven Stamkos for various reasons. And we'll mention a few. Number one, he is one of the best goal scorers in history up until this point. I think there's only 10 players in history that have scored more goals than Steven Stamkos under the age of 30. So there's your number one storyline, that we're talking about a great hockey player here. Number two is the injuries that this guy has dealt with the last 5 or 6 years have been so well documented. And you got to go back to 2014 when he broke his leg and it cost him an Olympic spot that Marty St. Louis, we know, filled in for him. And then there's the blood clot. And then there were knee injuries. And now we go into another scenario where he's lost the remainder of his season, and how well he was playing up until then, and how it was really shaping up for a Steven Stamkos push to finally get over the hump and win his Stanley Cup. And again, we know what TV does with those superstars that have done everything in their career except win a cup. And we've had so many of those examples, from Ray Bourque going from Boston to Colorado to chase his cup. That was all about Ray Bourque, that run. And then we had Detroit with Luc Robitaille and Brett Hall. Amazing careers. Some of the most prolific goal scorers in history. But something's missing. The Stanley Cup. And we got that last night at a Hockey Night in Canada. It was all about Stamkos. It was about what he's endured this season. I told you guys that it was also a scenario where, he left the bubble and had to deal with some personal issues, only to have to come back. A lot of people don't know that, but he had something he had to deal with on a personal basis. And now to come back and put himself in a position to come back and play game 3 and take that first shot on goal and nail it. Now we'll get into the goaltenders a little later on, and Hudobin and Vasilevsky didn't exactly bring their A games, but we are talking about one of the best shooters in our modern era here. I mean, yes, we'll give it to Ovechkin, but then right underneath him, you got to look at Steven Stamkos. And that was a hell of a shot and a hell of a goal and a hell of a reaction. Here you are in the Stanley Cup final, and every goal should be celebrated like it's the most important thing in the world. But don't tell me for 1 second that one didn't have a little bit of whipped cream on it with a cherry. To watch Hedman come into that pile. There was Maroon, there was Paquette, and then there was Ruta as well. I mean, Ruta hasn't played all that much, but even you could see the emotion and the passion for Stamkos scoring that goal. And after that goal, you're like, we're seeing something special here. We're seeing something that we could talk about for a long, long time. And then all of a sudden, if the story doesn't get crazier, we don't see too much more of him after that. The last 6 minutes, I think he was shut down. And television well documented the conversations with teammates and the trainer. And there was a sense something was up. And then to watch the second period, come on, everybody's coming on, no Steven Stamkos, and then he comes in a little later. And certainly not the energy that we saw in the hallway coming out for the second period like we did at the beginning of the game. It was a complete 180. And then he comes out and he takes those little shifts. And I've done those about 1,000 times where you kind of twist and turn. And there's an issue there. There's no question. And it's related to his surgery. Of course, hernia surgery, torn abdominal muscles, strained, whatever the case is. He had it done in March, and I've had that injury. It shut down my year. I ended up playing only, I think, 75 games, and a few of those were with pulled abdominal muscles. And I can tell you, one of the most painful things I've ever experienced my whole life. I can tell you that I was also led to believe that surgery would quickly take care of my issue. I didn't choose surgery. I didn't go down that path. It was the end of the year. I shut down the last 8-10 games of my season, and I figured by then I'd have a good 3.5 months. So I had May, June, July, and August. So I had 4 months, but I needed to train hard in 2 of them. But it took me 8-10 weeks to be pain-free without surgery. So here we are 7 months later for Steven Stamkos. And to watch him still have issues, and whether or not it's completely related to the surgery, or is it a byproduct off the surgery? So it's either high abdominal issues or it's his groin. And we saw that when he tested on the ice, the twisting and the turning and the pivoting, and it just wasn't there for him. And there's something seriously wrong there. That thing should have healed in 4 or 5 months. Should be an afterthought. He should have played this playoff. But there was a setback, and I think he documented that as well publicly, that there's an issue, and it needs to get addressed here. But he gave it the college try. Whether or not you can argue that this is more on the team than anything else, are the doctors giving him the right advice? Is he rehabbing correctly? Does he need to go have surgery again? Does this put his future in jeopardy in some sort of way? I mean, those are concerns for Steven Stamkos. They're concerns for Tampa Bay. But it was a hell of a story. I'll tell you how much a hell of a story it was. Jordan, my producer here, will never be accused of a hardcore hockey follower, but even you, Jordan, really appreciated the hype and the storyline of a Steven Stamkos. Am I correct? Well, I think Stamkos gave us all of that and so much more. And I really believed, and we talked about this yesterday with Doug McLean. I had no problems believing that he was going to play in Game 3, and he could have played in Game 2. And I insinuated that the only thing holding him back was Cooper. And good on Cooper. Cooper probably took a little bit of heat on social media as well for starting him on the fourth line. I'm sure at some point we would have seen him bumped up. Certainly would have seen him on that last power play in the first period, which we didn't. So that was the first red flag that something was wrong. But I think there's going to be a few people going, okay, we know you scored a goal that we're going to remember for a long, long time, but how does a guy who's been off 7 months now be in a position where he can't go longer than 3 minutes? If I'm the ownership group, I'd like to know why my thoroughbred can't make it past the first turn in the race.
So for my first official words, because I was muted earlier, I guess Kyper could hear me, Joe could hear me, but the faithful weren't able to. Just to like let you guys behind the scenes a little bit before the show today. We were talking, and Kyper was like, "Hey, what if we bring you on the show today?" And I was like, "All right, let's do it. Let's get everything set up." So that was my one error.
And you forgot to turn your mic on.
Yeah, I didn't even add my mic as a source to this. So I'm working on it. I'll get better. Every day I'll improve.
Am I going to get fined $50 for talking to myself?
Maybe.
I mean, is that
what it's
going
to
look like? Man.
Yeah.
Technology for you.
Your thoughts on that storyline?
Yeah.
Because I certainly appreciate it as a player that's been in this business, as an ex-player, and 35 years in pro hockey. But how about you watching it from afar?
So for me, man, I guess I would always look at the other side and say, isn't it better that he didn't play 1.5 minutes? You know, and so that's like how I look at it at first. The other thing I would say is that doctors in every field are not perfect. Just like we're not perfect. I just made that mistake earlier. But I don't know if anyone follows the NFL in the chat today, but the the LA Chargers doctor punctured Tyrod Taylor's lung over the weekend trying to administer painkillers. And that if we could
saw that story.
If we think that doctor is one of the 30 to 60 best, athletic training doctors who have the ability to administer painkillers in the country or the world even, to say that they can't make mistakes. So I don't know. Should you have surgery? Should you not have surgery? I would assume that Stamkos has a medical history, maybe 2 pages long from the times that he was a child. I don't think any of these things are single serving or like one particular case. Should he have played more in the playoffs? Yeah, I would love to see it. I loved how he was skating around. He looked like a little bit of a, figure skater action. It was good for memes, and that's what I'm here for. But overall, man, I want everyone to be healthy. You know what I mean? Like, I want everyone to be able to, like, I know it's corny to say it, but like, I think about like the 10 years later for Stamkos and stuff like that. Maybe that's me being too soft though.
Joe, Jordan wants to give the benefit of the doubt to the doctor. I say that's a load of crap, man. You got to be perfect with that sort of stuff. Once puncturing one guy is too much.
That was insane. I think we were all, I guess, not really sure what was happening. We weren't sure if it was kind of just like a quote unquote injury and they just wanted to get the rookie in there. But yeah, when that news came out, I was shocked by that. I would imagine that guy probably doesn't have a job anymore.
Oh,
Kyper, like,
you're not allowed to hold another needle in your life ever again.
I mean? You imagine the next guy that comes up to him for some sort of injection, they'd be terrified. But in terms of the Stammer stuff, Kyper, like you probably know it as well as anyone, like being injured, like you feel a part of it, you feel part of the team, like your teammates are going to be there to try and kind of pick you up a little bit on those bad days, but there's nothing like coming back from an injury and like instantly feeling kind of vindicated and a part of it all again. Like I heard some people saying like, oh, is Stamkos even going to get his name on the cup? Well, yeah, he played over the 41 games in the regular season that you need. And you also have to, if you didn't do that, you have to get at least one game in the finals. Right. Do I have that right, Kyper?
Yes, you do. Yes, you do. But I will say this, that even if we go back to 1994, we had a couple of guys that technically didn't qualify, and I believe it was Ed Olchuk and Mike Hartman. And we had guys go to bat for them and say, that's ridiculous. They've been with us all year. They're as much a part of the team as anyone else. And it was clear cut to the league that we're getting their names on the cup.
So you can appeal
it. So there is some there's some bend in that rule, but that was never an issue with Steven Stamkos in any way, shape, or form. So I think if he's waking up today and knowing that his season's over, which we really do believe, like I cannot see any scenario, guys, where you can't finish the end of the period and you're stapled to the bench for the second and the third, then all of a sudden you're going to find a way to show up on the weekend and play. That's just not the way it works in the game, nor should it be, because now you're not only messing with your short-term rehab, which you got to get better. You have to find a way to get better again. And if that means going in and doing another surgery or just doing it the conventional way, and that's through hard work and training, you got to look after that first. And then you got to look at your long-term ability to keep playing the game and how far you want to play and all of that. You just don't risk it by coming back on the weekend. So that doesn't seem to be an issue. But I think there's a little bit of a saving grace of getting that goal in, and it's too bad that it should have been the game-winning goal, but it didn't end up being the game-winning goal because of the late Heiskanen third period goal. But the other thing too, guys, in all of this and is Tampa Bay's deep. And while we've talked about other superstars in the playoffs that they're screwed if they lose them, that never really was in the equation here with Steven Stamkos in Tampa. There wasn't ever a time, and we've started with everybody else prior to August 1st throughout this. There was never a narrative, guys, that said Tampa Bay can't win the cup without Steven Stamkos. And that just speaks to the depth and how good that lineup is.
I'm with you, Kyper. I think that it was pretty crazy to see like just the reaction on his face, though. Like that's what I'm here for, right? Like 211 days after his last NHL game, he comes in, scores on like his third shift. That's just something that, like, if that is the only Steven Stamkos we get throughout the playoffs, like that's going to go down as one of the great all-time NHL Stanley Cup final moments, right?
So I have something else. Joe mentioned 211 days, and that brings me to something that one of our hockey writers, Ian Cameron, brought up yesterday on Twitter. Have Twitter on screen right now. Hopefully everyone can see it and read it clearly. It's a tweet from Chris Johnston yesterday talking about what John Cooper said about Steven Stamkos. Quote unquote, he's inching closer. I joked and asked if it was like a centimeter or a millimeter or what the deal was. But from my perspective, Joe's perspective, we're fantasy people. We're betting people. We want information when we want it. And to me, like, this inching closer stuff is nonsense. Like, I find it extremely hard to believe that there's a world that exists that they didn't know this was happening a couple days ago, 3-4 days ago. And I'm just like, I want information. I want
Jordan.
Probable. I want doubtful. Like, these, I don't want lower body. When Joe told me about that the injury designations for hockey were lower body and upper body, I said, that's a lot of body. There's like some large bones in there.
This. I am with you, and I am traditional. And if I was a member of the team, I'd say, screw you with your information. I don't care if it's going to affect your betting or not. But, you know, Gary Bettman and the league are in a catch-22 kind of scenario here where you've got now the ability to bet on games. We know what the U.S. Supreme Court said a few years ago, that betting on pro sports in any state is going to become legal, and it's up to the states now to negotiate those deals. And yet it's staying the way it is. And I get it. And old school Nick would say exactly what I told you. Scram, beat it. None of your damn business.
Yeah.
But the new school says, no, if you want people to kind of put some money on the line here and want to have skin in the game watching it and be more engaged, you got to come cleaner with your information. But until Gary Bettman and the rest of the owners go up to John Cooper and say, no, there's no inching closer, and there's no probable or doubtful. There's more than that. It's, you know, within 24 hours or within 10 hours or 6 hours or 3 hours. I don't care. But you got to say in or out at that point, so you can let people have the best chance to at least put their money where their mouth is. So I get it. I get it where you're coming from.
And like, I've openly talked about this before. I'm very into cap related stuff, CBA related stuff. It might not be everyone else's cup of tea, but what's the term in hockey? Is it hockey related income? Or I know in basketball, it's basketball related income. If you want that pie to continually grow, and I know that you've spoken about this in the past as you talk about the NHL alum and how great they're doing. We had Glenn Healy on recently, who's someone that stood out to me massively. He said, I don't have to tell families no anymore. And the reason that that's the case is because that pie is growing, right? Is that incorrect? Yeah. And when you talk about the amount of money that you get from these extracurriculars, if you will, like, if you want to play the game, you gotta follow the rule. That's how I view it, at least. I would be thrilled to hear anybody's comments in chat or in the comments below after the fact. Let us know what you think.
Well, and you know, I know we're also inching closer, can I use that term, to all these type of prop bets. But if fans knew that Stamkos was playing well before seeing him come out for warm-up, how many of them would have loved to have bet whether or not he scored a goal, or how many shots on goal he would get, or what's the over-under on playing 8 or 10 minutes or 15? All of that could have come into play here, and yet you're taking that away completely.
One thing we always talk about too, Kipper, just to jump in with in terms of prop betting, is that's why it's so nice to be able to bet unders on props overall, because a lot of times those lines aren't going to take into effect, like if there is an injury or if a player's coming in and he isn't going to finish the game. We talk about it in football all the time because there's so many different injuries that, like, it's not baked into the price. That's why we almost always end up on unders if it's even close, because so much can go wrong. And like, even just think of from a hockey perspective, if you're betting on like goalie saves or something like that, but you happen to think that the game is especially lopsided and there's going to be a lot of saves, you're not baking into the fact, like, what if this guy gets pulled? If he gets pulled after the first period, he gives up 5 goals, he's for sure not hitting the over on his saves. So like that kind of stuff, I love prop bets. I've said it before on the show that I think that those are some of the most fun and casual type of bets you can do. So we'll get more into that as we work through it, Kipper.
Don't know how much you guys actually watched of last night's game, but I can tell you, I was disappointed. I was disappointed in Dallas, and I really thought Game 3 is pivotal. And I think statistically speaking, if we're going to give some love to analytics, that historically Game 3 in the Stanley Cup Final, the winner goes on to 75% to win the Stanley Cup. So I just thought for sure we were going to get to a Game 6 or 7 if Dallas was able to win Game 3. That didn't happen. I watched Dallas last night, and I saw a team that was mentally tired, that could not find a way to get over the hump. I actually thought they got off to a decent start. They got the first power play, and I thought they actually had good jump those first few minutes. And then it's as if all that magic, whatever they had defensively, just disappeared. If you really go back, guys, and I don't want to take anything away from Tampa Bay because their best players are their best players, and that's not happening with Dallas, and the score sheet will show you everything you need to know about your best players showing up for Tampa Bay. But didn't Dallas gift them almost every goal? Like if you watch the Kucherov first goal, and I look at the Miro Heiskanen giveaway where he spun off of Palat. First of all, you know, when you start driving into your team to finish your hits, it's for those moments now. And not that Miro Heiskanen was scared of Palat coming in on him, but when you've been hammered and hammered and hammered, the tendency is it finally catches up where you're going to do something that you don't really want to do. And that's exactly what happened on that first goal. Miro Heiskanen is so used to Tampa Bay finishing their checks and coming in hard that he said, enough, I'm going this way. And when he spun off and he threw up a complete pizza up the middle of the ice, who was there? One of the best players in the world in Kucherov, and now you're down 1-0. The other thing that you don't see in that goal on an original highlight is where was Heskinen's defense partner? And that was Jamie Alexiak. And I get it, man. You've scored what? 5 goals in the playoffs? 3 weeks ago, you scored on a breakaway against Vegas in Game 3. But what are you looking for, another breakaway? Jamie, where are you? You're the second man up the ice. You're nowhere to be found to at least back up anything. And when you start seeing the Dallas Stars make those mistakes, and then on the Stamkos goal, it was a great pass by by Hedman, cross ice. But when Lindell doesn't close off Stamkos, when he's late, that tells me everything you know about the magic fairy dust that's been with Dallas this whole time, because they can only win one way, and that's strong defense and closing off those seams.
There's so much there, Kyper.
And then you know, not to go on, but more gifts. Okay, the power play goal by Hedman, and then the Braden Point goal is a 3-on-1. Go back and look at that line change. And I talked about Jamie Alexiak being up ice on the first goal. Go see where Klingberg is on the one that turned around on a 3-on-1 and made the score 4-1. Klingberg's up the ice. He's the first forechecker trying to get the puck in deep. And then we have 2 horrible changes by Dallas, and now you're going to give up a 3-on-1 to Kucherov, Point, and Palat. Come on, guys. Stanley Cup Final. It's over by then. And I know that third period, and now it's 5-1. You got a goaltender and change, and you know, I'm not going to harp on the officials. I thought that first Radulov penalty was marginal at best, and then he took another stupid penalty. And yeah, they're still undisciplined. They still take bad penalties, and it still costs them, and that's a story in itself. But then you lose Jamie Benn to a 10-minute misconduct with Ruta. and again, I don't want to shit on the officials, but come on. Put him in the box for 2 minutes and call it a day. Do not take Jamie Benn on a 10-minute misconduct. Okay, that's just overthinking it. You don't have to tell the world that the game's over at 5-1. Don't tell them that. That's all you did as an official, is you tell us if you're going to throw Jamie Benn in on a 10-minute misconduct on that play, all you're telling us is this game's over and I don't want anything to get out of hand. Ugh. Okay. But overall, it's going to be interesting to see how Dallas can rebound off of this. Mentally is the biggest challenge. Physically, these guys are good athletes, and the body recovers. You get your treatment, you get your fluids in, you get your carbs in, but none of that comes into play with what's between the ears here. So they said when this whole thing started, Joe and Jordan, that the ones that you got to feel sorry for the most are the guys that lose in this Stanley Cup bubble. That's the team that you really got to feel for. So I'm gonna be real interested to see how they come out Friday night, and it's a back-to-back as well. So unless anything changes from what I saw last night, we could see a Stanley Cup presented as early as Saturday night. But you guys want a thought, Joe? You want a thought on Dallas last night?
Kyper, tons of good stuff there. I think one of the things that really stood out to me overall was just talking about like finishing your checks in a series like this is just so big, especially when you have some young defensemen on the other side. We're big Mira Heiskanen people here for sure. Obviously, that type of mistake, it's because he hears those footsteps coming, right? Like he knows he's about to get hit no matter what, and that's just something that builds upon in a series. Like we're not even halfway through this series. Hopefully we can see Dallas rebound here and we get a long series, but that's just something that even by the time game 5, game 6 rolls around, hopefully that we can, that's something that builds upon each other for sure. I think that like this game could have broke differently in the very beginning as well. Like let's not forget about that big save that Vasilevsky made on Corey Perry early. That one was, I thought, a really big turning point earlier in the game. But when a team like Tampa Bay that has so much depth, like you mentioned, like they haven't had Stamkos this entire time. Stamkos comes in and scores. Like, can't you just feel it on the other bench right away? They're just like, there's another guy we got to worry about now, right? And all the heavy hitters were there. Obviously, Hedman scores, Kucherov scores. Like all of these guys were there. I loved Hedman's goal in particular. Changes the angle slightly was something to be seen. Like there's not many guys that can do that, and let alone at his size. So I'm super, I guess, impressed with Hedman overall. I saw a stat that he's one of the first blue liners to ever score 10 plus goals in a single postseason. There's only 2 other guys that have done it. So I've been
one
really
of them was my teammate
him.
Brian Leach in 1994, and of course the great Paul Coffey. So he's amongst the best, Joe, right now, and it's not even a contest on who the most valuable player throughout this playoff has been, and it will be a landslide. And I don't want to take anything away from Point and what he's been able to do, but I think this just speaks volumes now on when it comes to pace of play in a hockey game and who truly has the ability to control a game. It's on the blue line. It's not a centerman. It's not even Ovechkin. And when he's scoring all his goals, it is a guy like Hedman. It's a guy like Nick Lidstrom. It's a Paul Coffey in his day in terms of being able to go 200 feet up and back. And to a lesser extent, of course, the centerman has the most responsibilities out of any forward on the ice. And he is, in many ways, a 200-foot guy. But why is it that when you look at ice time, it's always the defenseman that has 27, 28, 30 minutes of ice time, and it's not your centerman? It's just that Hedman right now is a very, very special player. And I listened to Stamkos in his press conference after the game, and he talked about how Hedman took over for me. He is the captain. When I'm not here, he is the captain. You watch him, the way he carries himself off the ice, on the ice, whether or not he's waiting for all the guys to come on the ice or waiting for all the guys to leave the ice. He is a general out there. He is running the show. Last night, his goal, his passes, he's owning it right now. And that's a guy, and we watched him early in his career. People would describe me about him in those first years in Tampa Bay as brain dead when he crossed over the opposition's blue line, that he had no touch or feel for the offense. And now he's mentioned amongst the greatest players in the history of the game for defensemen. Yeah, this guy's come a long way.
It's good company.
Really come a long way, right? Great company, Jordan. And when you see Miro Heiskanen, and he's young, let's not forget he's young, and we've certainly talked about him and the potential to be one of the great ones as well, but he's young, and right now he's tired.
That's what I want to mention here is the luxury that you've been describing without really diving into it is that, like, you mentioned Hedman, you mentioned Kucherov, you mentioned all these people, and to me that's just depth, right? And you talk about this weird circumstance of being in the bubble. I feel like attrition is coming in a lot of different ways, whether it's hockey, basketball, whatever sport you're in. I feel like when you're at this spot, it's really going to come down to an energy type of thing, a health type of thing, what your training staff is doing. Maybe it has a little to do with the room service you've been getting, you know, all those things. But I really do.
How about that? How about that? When did room service become a story, Jordan? When did it become who's paying for room service? My goodness.
I think my parents would say it became a story the first time I ordered room service without permission. But other than that, I think, for the players,
do we not know room service charges double anywhere else you go? If we not figured that out,
I hope it was good at
least. There's a lot of overhead in a hotel. Okay, it's called a $25 hamburger. That's what it's called in a hotel. It's called $6.95 anywhere else.
Such is life. Such is life.
Kipper, I have a question for you. So we've talked a lot about Tampa Bay today. What can Dallas do to get back into this thing? What can they do to make it a series? Is it Tyler Seguin finally getting off the snide?
Yes, of course it
playing
is.
Better? Like the big guys got to show up, right?
Yeah, and I did my best to kind of defend Seguin a little bit, and they were coming off a win when Doug McClain started hammering me on Seguin. But when you are making $9.5–10 million, and it's been crystal clear in our game for 100 years that your best players have to be your best players in order to win, then there's nothing that you can do but take the heat. And Sagan's taking the heat right now. Whether or not, he can find a way to get on the score sheet as early as Friday or Saturday, or this thing's going to kind of quietly come to an end for Dallas, there's going to be a lot of people wondering, what's going on. And I know he's hurt. I know he was hurt coming in. But was it to the point where it could keep you from scoring more goals than 2 in 23 games? I have lost count. What is it? But when you're playing still 20 minutes a night on some occasions, you have to be deemed healthy enough to shoot a puck in a net, in a net. And that's going to come back. It's going to be something that Sagan's going to have to deal with, but that's what $10 million players have to do. They've got to deal with the good and the bad.
Yeah, I think what's interesting about Seguin, Kipper, not to cut you off there, but the ice time that he's getting, and in this series, he's only generated 2 high danger scoring chances. Like, just for a little bit of perspective, Kucherov has 6. So pretty similar ice time. Yeah. One guy that's really doing it for his team in all aspects, and one guy that just, if he's someone that we almost always see really high in that stat just because he generates so much offensively. He's usually not afraid to go to those dirty areas depending on where the shots are coming from. But that's a crazy low number for Tyler Seguin. He's obviously a guy we focus on a lot for fantasy, so I wanted to check that. Yeah, and the problem is too is while Kucherov's got Point and Point's got Kucherov, it's tough. Seguin doesn't have Radulov going right now.
he seems to be sidetracked a little bit with chasing guys or hooking guys. He's taking some bad penalties, so he's not going. Ben, you've squeezed everything you can out of Jamie Benn, but I don't think we'll ever consider Jamie Benn being elite scorer in our league ever again. So that line can't match up 5-on-5. 3-0 head-to-head last night with Point, Kucherov, and Palat just owning them offensively with the scoring chances, with the zone time, you name it. Everything just favors the big Tampa Bay line. But
so what do you do to change that? How do you fight it? Do you like try to wait another game or two to see if your systems work, or do you kind of start throwing stuff at the wall and seeing what sticks?
No, we're not typically, Jordan, a league that starts throwing stuff at the wall and sticks. Repetition, and you just hope it's like smashing a boulder, 999 times, and you feel it's you haven't made a dent in it, and the 1000th time that you hit it, it cracks it right open. And that's the philosophy I think Dallas has to take, is that they can't start looking at different things. Can you tweak a lineup? Can you change a power play a little bit? Can you you're not going to change Hudobin. You pulled him because you want to get him ready for Friday night. You're not going to go to a backup goalie that you've never heard of. So that's not going to happen. And no disrespect to Ottinger, but that's not happening. So what choice do you have? You just hope that your horses come and they feel a little better, they feel re-energized, and they have a better push. That's Dallas's only hope.
What about when you head to the Saturday game, second half of the back-to-back, and you lose Friday? What do you do in that case?
More the same. More of the same. Now you're down 3-1.
Yeah.
There's no Superman waiting in the stands here. They don't have a Stamkos that you're hoping can come back and be healthy and score a goal on his second or third shift. That's not there. And they are running out of injuries, or they're running out of bodies. Fasca out, and the other one we mentioned the other night was Como. They had a great third line checking line with Como and Fasca included, right? And it's not there anymore. Those guys are big, strong, heavy guys, right? It's not there anymore. So you can hope that your big boys come up and have a good showing, and somehow Seguin opens up the floodgates and gets 2 or 3 points, and you can extend this thing. But right now, Jordan, there's nothing. There's no magic wand that can change anything, and that's why you stick to what you know best. And you've had some success on your systems, and you've had some success clogging up the middle of the ice. You got to have a patient game. I thought I didn't think there was going to be many penalties at all. What did we have last night? 8, and I said I would have been surprised if there was 3 or 4. Now, the officials still had a little bit something to do with it, with a few marginal calls, but I didn't see enough discipline that warranted Dallas to keep this thing close, and be a little patient here. And that's something that they're going to have to revisit on the weekend. You want to take a couple of comments or questions out of our group?
Absolutely, man. We can do whatever your little heart desires, my friend. We got it covered for you. I was just going on Twitter really quickly, and I saw a little stat that there was 113 hits last night in Game 3. Other than that, the injured Stamkos, the only skater to not land a single hit, Hedman. So, I mean, you wonder how that sort of statistic and analytical dive really impacts the game.
First of all, Jordan, I'll tell you,
me.
You don't have to hit anybody when you got the puck all the time.
Yeah, that's good.
Never out of position.
That's Hedman. That's how good Hedman is and continues to be in this series. But the beauty of Tampa Bay, and they've been short for the last 5-6 years of getting over the hump, is when you start adding bodies. And I'll tell you something about hitting, because it was my job to lead the charge when I played. Okay, it is contagious, and it's really hard for players who don't necessarily have the reputation of hitting to watch teammates, and the more of them that do it, the guiltier you feel for not doing it. So once you have on board those type of guys, and we know when Julien Brisebois traded for guys like Coleman, when he traded for guys like Goudreau, and when he got a guy like Patrick Maroon, who did it all the time for St. Louis. He knew what he was getting in Tampa Bay. When you add those guys and it just starts bleeding on your team and on the bench, that's how you get those stats, with the exception of Hedman. And Tampa Bay's done an amazing job. And it's the reason why they're going to win the Stanley Cup, is because they bought into that. And it is the whipped cream, and it is the cherry on top of guys showing up and playing that hard. I remember our team in 94. We had guys that just led that charge. Stefan Matteau, who of course had 2 double overtime goals. But at the end of the day, he knew he was 6'4". He knew he weighed, over 200 pounds. He knew he had to get in people's way. Brian Noonan, same thing. Those guys knew that they can contribute offensively, and they did. But if they're not finishing checks, if they're not leaning on people, if they're not making guys like Miro Heiskanen do something that they don't want to do because they don't have enough time to think about it, man, that's the difference maker right there.
Roughing it up a little bit.
Let me ask you this. So, like, say something's not going well for one of your stars, like Seguin, like, you got to be bringing something to the table, right? Like, I know a lot of people, they kind of say this about Ovechkin. When he's not scoring, he's still out there making a difference, throwing his body around a little bit, just getting it back into the game. Like, at that point, you've got to bring something to the table if it's not going well offensively.
Listen, Sagan's trying, but he's not anybody that's going to run anybody over. And I don't think necessarily he's going to be a guy that, can make you constantly do something you don't want to do based on the fact that could come in and hurt you a little bit. That's not his game. He is a skating guy. He's a finesse guy. He's a finisher. He's got that touch. It's dry right now. So what are you going to do now if you're Rick Bowness? You can't bench the guy. You can't sit him out. I think it's too late for him to miss a rotation or two to get a message across. Those things are just too late. That's why you have an 82-game season. You have, the 82 games supposed to be the dress rehearsal to the real thing. And some of that stuff should have been cleaned out, long before. But, Sagan's a good player that could break out at any time. That's all Rick Bowness has to hang on to right now, is that there's still time for his big boys to put the puck in the net.
Got to be a lot of value to that, man. We talked about it with Scott Niedermayer a couple weeks ago, and just along our conversations, just having space, being comfortable, knowing that someone else is going to cover your weak spots. I feel like that's like just inherently valuable, whether it's NFL, NHL, whatever it is. Like, just having your skilled players be able to be skilled because of what everybody else is doing, right? And I find those are the type of players that I really am attracted to.
Yeah, and Dallas has done a good job of that, Jordan. They really have for now a month and a half. They've shown that they've had the ability to do that, and it's not by accident they're here. They earned it. Mm-hmm. Okay, look at who they went through. Okay, whether we're talking about Calgary, Colorado, and Vegas, if I'm right off the top of my head. I mean, those are tough series, man. Those are heavy teams. We're talking about a Western Conference too, that is still built on power, on big boy hockey. Like I said, no accident for Dallas to be here, but there comes a certain point where you try to draw blood out of a stone, and I think that's where Rick Bowness kind of feels it a little bit. I talked earlier on the show about Hudobin. I mean, he couldn't find his net with a searchlight last night, okay? Off the post, and I'm not taking anything away from Stamkos' amazing shot, but the television does not lie. You saw how much net he gave. And even Vasilevsky on the Dickinson goal, short side, like this much. Those guys had an off game, and they're tired too. They're mentally spent, and we can get into another hour on how, this is the time of year where maybe you jump on a plane, and if you're lucky enough to go home to your fan base and your family, and you get re-energized, and you read the signs on the way to the rink on your lawn, and your neighbors, and they're cheering, and there's an adrenaline rush that you can never, ever replicate in a stinking bubble. And Dallas would need that more than anything now to go home and hear 18,000 screaming fans saying you could still do it. You can come back. Yeah, it's not there. It's not there. And you could see it a little bit, when they do sag, that they're missing that shot of adrenaline.
Yeah.
And that it is what it is. And we're not going to make any excuses on it. We're not going to cry about it, because I've said this and I've been consistent about it all run here. I'll take this over the alternative.
Big time. And that leads me to some questions that I want to get into. We have two very important questions in chat, and then one actually important one that I want to talk about. But the two important ones that we'll dive into start off beautifully, eloquently. Jeremiah Maxwell says, "I am with you, Jordan." Then Yoda says, "Jordan, you are right. This is what you guys should do. I really think that this is the way to get your comments featured. I encourage this sort of sentence structure." First thing, though, talking about betting, right? Going back to what we were talking about, is there a world that exists that the information, being injured, etc., becomes more important than the external money Bettman gets from his partners? Is there a world where we ever hit an impasse there?
Yeah, but it would have to come from the players first, right? So you got to understand that we are dealing with sensitive personal issues when it comes to each and every player. So some like it out, some don't. Some think it hurts them. Some players don't. So if there ever is this world that's going to be created for it, I think it has to come upon the players to decide once and for all what they want, how they want their information distributed, and what they're comfortable with. We do know that, there's been a lot of heat over COVID and who tested positive and who didn't, and who has the right to report whether or not I've got COVID, and what does it do for me short and long term. And all of that comes into play. So I think if we're going to see a world that changes with the information, it's got to be the players that decide. It's their information. If they're going down this world of betting and they support it and encourage it, then they're going to have to look each other in the eye and say, okay, we can't suck and blow at the same time. We can't take their money and then give them zero in the process. So which is it? Like, what are we doing here? So let's figure it out. And I think it's more of a Players Association issue than it is even a Gary Bettman NHL issue. Gary really needs to go back to the players and say, it's your information. What do you guys want to do with it? You want to hand it over, or you want to keep it, tucked inside your coat pocket?
Great answer. Joe, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think Kyper pretty much nailed it. I think it comes down to what the players want in a lot of ways. But I mean, Jordan, you can speak to this too. It's been such a difference in NBA since the betting kind of has come into that. Like it's different how quickly we get the news for like the starting lineups, that sort of thing. So I don't know if we ever get to that point in the NHL, but I mean, it's changed a lot in the NBA for sure.
Yeah, I think the NHL is probably, maybe besides golf, the biggest sport that really rests on tradition. I'm not sure if that's out of line me saying that, but that's how it feels to me. And I feel that a lot of times the only way that traditions are broken is if there's like a large sum of money incentivizing people to do that. So I'll be interested to see how it goes. Another thing that I will say is that a lot of people would criticize the NBA and all sports leagues. And if you go to our comments, you'll see a lot of those criticizing things happening. But The NBA is consumed in a much different way with younger people than pretty much any other league. And I wonder if that instant bit of information has anything to do with that. The people watching on House of Highlights on Instagram, the kids who never watch an NBA game but know every single detail of the injury report. That's a new wave that's happening.
Well, listen,
right?
I will say this. You got to go back and listen to Gary Bettman's comments on gambling and how much he was opposed to it 4 years ago, 3 years ago, 8 years ago. Okay. If you would have said 5 years ago that Gary Bettman was going to start cutting deals for online gambling, you would have had a punch in the mouth. You would have just said, don't waste my time on this conversation.
Yeah.
It'll never happen. So what had happened since then, Jordan, is that the ratings start going down and they find kids watching less. And when I grew up, I would turn on Hockey Night in Canada at 8:00 and I wouldn't move. I'd lie on the floor with a pillow and I wouldn't move for 2.5 hours, 3 hours. We know the kids aren't doing that today.
Mm-hmm.
They're not watching games for 2.5 hours, but what they're doing is they're getting their highlights on their phone. They're still going to bars, restaurants. They're still hanging out with their buds. They're at the pool hall. When there's a goal, it's scored. I get to see it. And they're not engaged like they used to be. And that's the number one reason why Gary went and cut this deal, is to get that next generation to sit there and go, I think I got a way that you're going to watch the whole game. And that's when you could, put a little skin on the line here. Because you will watch a 7-1 score if the over-under's higher than that. You will watch if you got prop bets. You will watch constantly, and that's Gary listening to that next generation. So I do believe that they pay attention. They're working on it, and a big part of that early introduction to sports betting will only lead them down to being more transparent as the years go by.
And just the last thing I'll say on that is that I don't want it to sound like Joe, or, I don't want to speak for Joe, but myself, that I'm just like, oh yeah, gambling, let's do it, everybody, let's have a ball. Like, no, I'm very, very keen, as our friends at blitzbet.eu would say, about like responsible gambling education. But even if we just remove that whole aspect of anything wager related, I think there's a lot of value in talking about how people will enjoy the game differently. I just think that gambling is one of those ways that they enjoy it differently. Is it video games? Is it Twitch? Is it whatever it might be? Yeah. I think that's how you expand the pie. And that's just me speaking,
It's not going away. It's not going away. And I came from a traditional television network at Sportsnet, at TSN. I assure you, and all our listeners and viewers, they are having the same conversation in their boardrooms on how they can get involved in all of that, and how they know where that next generational push is going to go, and how do we get involved. It's happening, whether we like it or not, whether we want it old school or not. This is the direction it's going.
Hey, that's it. Right?
Okay. All right, listen. You guys aren't exactly Doug McLean, Darren Pang, or Alan May, but I got to tell you, you did a hell of a job today for me.
Thanks, brother.
Okay? It was awesome to have you guys more involved. For all our watchers and listeners, hit the like button for Jordan and Joe, who did a very admirable job filling in for some of our regulars. But I am back again with Doug McLean tomorrow, and we'll get into more around the league as well, teeing up game 4 as we get into what we think is a pretty good advantage mentally and physically for Tampa Bay. But we'll see what's left out of Dallas going into the weekend. Doug McLean will be back with me tomorrow. For all of you, enjoy the rest of the day and night, and we'll see you on the Real Kyper at Noon show tomorrow.